Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. Tonight, we dive into Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl, a chilling tale of love, betrayal, and a shocking twist. This version has been carefully reimagined and rewritten, crafted to bring you a fresh, suspenseful experience unlike any other.
The house glowed with a quiet warmth, its curtains drawn tight against the evening. Two lamps cast soft pools of light, one beside Mary's chair, the other waiting by the empty seat across from her. On the sideboard, glasses stood ready, whiskey and soda prepared, ice cubes glistening in their bucket. Mary Maloney sat in calm anticipation, her needle moving gently through fabric. Every glance at the clock was not impatience, but delight, each tick bringing her closer to the moment she longed for. Her smile was serene, her movements unhurried, her face radiant with the softness of expectancy. At 10 minutes to 5, her ears sharpened. Moments later, the familiar sounds arrived. Tires crunching gravel, a car door shutting, footsteps approaching, the key sliding into the lock. She rose, setting aside her sewing, and moved forward with quiet joy. "Hello, darling," she whispered as he stepped inside. "Hello," came his reply, heavy but familiar. She slipped his coat from his shoulders, hung it neatly away, and poured the drinks, strong for him, gentle for herself. Soon they were seated opposite each other, the clink of ice echoing in his glass as he rocked it slowly in his hands. For Mary, this was the golden hour. She knew he preferred silence until the first drink was gone, and she was content to bask in his presence, soaking in the warmth that seemed to radiate from him. She adored the way he moved, the way his eyes carried distant thoughts, the curve of his mouth, and above all, the quiet strength in his silence. "Tired, darling?" she asked softly.
"Yes," he muttered. "I'm tired." But the way he said it was different. Flat, heavy, almost final. Without warning, he tipped the glass back and swallowed the rest in one long pull. Mary wasn't looking directly at him, but she heard the hollow clatter of ice cubes striking the bottom when he lowered the empty glass. He leaned forward, paused, then rose with deliberate slowness to pour himself another. "I'll get it," she offered quickly, springing to her feet. "Sit down," he ordered, his voice sharp, leaving no room for argument. When he returned, the drink in his hand glowed a deep amber, darker than usual. The whiskey poured heavy. "Darling, shall I fetch your slippers?" she asked, trying to soften the silence. "No." She watched him sip, the liquid swirling thickly, oily shadows twisting in the glass. Mary tried again, her voice gentle, almost pleading. "It's unfair, really, a man of your rank still forced to walk the streets all day." He gave no reply. The only sound was the faint clink of ice against glass each time he raised it to his lips. "Would you like some cheese? I didn't make supper, it's Thursday." "No." "If you're too tired to go out, we could eat here. There's plenty in the freezer. You wouldn't even have to move." Her eyes searched his face for a smile, a nod, any sign of warmth. Nothing. "I'll get you cheese and crackers anyway," she insisted, rising. "I don't want it," he snapped. Mary shifted uneasily, her wide eyes fixed on him. "But you must eat," she whispered. "I'll prepare it, and you can decide later." She set her sewing aside, but his voice cut through the air again. "Sit down." Just for a minute. "Sit down." It was then that fear began to creep into her chest. "Go on," he pressed, his tone heavier now. "Sit down." Slowly she lowered herself back into the chair, her gaze locked on him, bewildered and searching. He drained the second glass, staring into its depths, his brow furrowed as though wrestling with something unspeakable.
"Listen," he said at last, his voice low, deliberate. "There's something I need to tell you." Mary's heart fluttered. "What is it, darling? What's wrong?" He sat perfectly still, the lamplight cutting across his face, leaving his mouth in shadow. A faint twitch near his eye betrayed the strain beneath his calm.
Listen, he said at last, his voice low, deliberate. "There's something I need to tell you." Mary's heart fluttered. "What is it, darling? What's wrong?" He sat perfectly still, the lamplight cutting across his face, leaving his mouth in shadow. A faint twitch near his eye betrayed the strain beneath his calm. "This will come as a shock, but I've thought it through. The only way is to tell you now. I hope you won't hold it against me." And then he spoke. The words were brief, no more than a few minutes, but each syllable carried him further away from her, as though he were vanishing into some unreachable distance. Mary sat frozen, her eyes wide, her mind reeling in silent horror. "So that's how it is. I know the timing is cruel, but there was no other choice. I'll see you're provided for. Money, comfort, everything you need. But there mustn't be a fuss. It wouldn't be good for my position." Her first instinct was denial. Surely he hadn't said it. Perhaps she had imagined the whole thing. If she simply carried on, if she pretended she hadn't heard, maybe later she would wake to find none of it had ever happened. "I'll get supper," she whispered, her voice barely audible. This time he didn't stop her. She moved across the room, numb, her body detached from sensation. Her feet seemed not to touch the floor. Her stomach churned with a sickly weight. Down the steps, into the cellar, the light switch flicked, the freezer opened. Her hand closed around the first thing it found. Wrapped in paper. Heavy. Cold. She tore the wrapping away. A leg of lamb. Yes. Supper. That would be supper. She carried it upstairs, gripping the bone with both hands. In the living room, she saw him standing by the window, his back turned, his figure rigid against the fading light. She stopped. "For God's sake," he muttered, hearing her approach but refusing to turn. "Don't bother with supper. I'm going out."
And then it happened. Mary moved behind him, silent, steady, her hands gripping the frozen leg of lamb. Without hesitation, she swung it high, then brought it crashing down against the back of his skull. The blow was brutal, like steel striking bone. For a moment, he remained upright, swaying as though suspended between life and death. Then, with a heavy crash, he toppled to the carpet, the small table clattering over in the fall. The sound jolted her from her trance. She blinked at the body, cold and astonished, still clutching the absurd weapon in her hands. "So, I've killed him," she thought, the words echoing in her mind. And strangely, her thoughts sharpened. She knew the penalty. Death, prison, disgrace. That was fine. She could accept it. But the child, what would happen to her unborn baby? Would they punish them both? Wait until the birth? She didn't know, and she wasn't willing to risk it. Her movements became automatic. She carried the meat to the kitchen, slid it into a pan, turned the oven high, and shoved it inside. Then she washed her hands, climbed the stairs, and sat before the mirror. Her reflection stared back, pale, shaken. She fixed her hair,
touched her lips, forced a smile. It looked wrong. She tried again. Better. "Hello, Sam," she rehearsed, her voice bright, almost cheerful. "I'd like some potatoes, please, and a tin of peas." Yes, that sounded natural. She repeated it until the smile and tone felt convincing. Then she slipped on her coat, stepped out the back door, and walked down the garden path into the street. The grocery lights still glowed against the evening. Mary entered, her smile polished, her voice steady. "Hello, Sam," she said warmly to the man behind the counter.
"Good evening, Mrs. Maloney," the grocer greeted warmly. "Potatoes, please, Sam, and a tin of peas," she replied with a cheerful smile. He reached for the peas, and Mary added lightly, "Patrick's decided he's too tired to go out tonight. Thursdays are usually our night, but he's caught me without a single vegetable in the house." "Then perhaps some meat?" Sam suggested. "No, I've already got that," she said quickly. "A fine leg of lamb from the freezer." "Oh," he nodded. "I don't usually cook it frozen," she added, her tone casual, "but I'll take the risk this time. Do you think it'll turn out all right?" "Doesn't make much difference," Sam assured her. "Would you like Idaho potatoes?" "Yes, perfect. 2 of those." "And for afterwards?" he asked pleasantly. She tilted her head, playing the part. "What would you recommend, Sam?" He glanced around. "A slice of cheesecake. I know Patrick enjoys that." "Perfect," she said brightly. "He loves it." She paid, thanked him with her most radiant smile, and stepped back into the night. As she hurried home, she rehearsed the story in her mind. She was simply a wife returning with groceries, preparing supper for her tired husband. If, by some terrible chance, she were to discover tragedy inside the house, she would react as any wife would, shocked, frantic, overcome with grief. But for now, she reminded herself, there was nothing unusual. Just Mrs. Patrick Maloney walking home on a Thursday evening, carrying vegetables for supper. Everything must remain natural, absolutely natural. And if she kept it that way, there would be no need for acting at all.
She slipped in through the back door, humming softly, her smile rehearsed and steady. "Patrick," she called brightly, "how are you, darling?" The parcel landed on the kitchen table, and she moved into the living room. Then she saw him. His body twisted unnaturally on the carpet, one arm bent beneath him, his legs folded awkwardly. The sight struck her like a blow. All the old love, the longing, the grief, everything surged at once. She dropped to her knees beside him, clutching his lifeless form, sobbing uncontrollably. It was effortless. No acting required. Minutes later, she rose and reached for the phone. Her fingers dialed the number she knew by heart. "Quick! Please come quickly! Patrick's dead!" she cried into the receiver. "Who's speaking?" "Mrs. Maloney. Mrs. Patrick Maloney." "You mean Patrick Maloney is dead?" "I think so," she sobbed. "He's lying on the floor. I think he's gone." "We'll be right there." The patrol car arrived swiftly. 2 officers stepped inside, men she recognized, men who knew her husband well. She collapsed into a chair, then followed one of them, O'Malley, as he knelt beside the body. Is he dead?" she cried. "I'm afraid he is." "What happened?" Through tears, she told her story. The trip to the grocer, the return home, the terrible discovery. While she spoke, Noonan bent close and found a dark patch of blood at the back of Patrick's head. He showed O'Malley, who immediately hurried to the phone. Soon, the house filled with men, first a doctor, then detectives, then a photographer,
and finally a fingerprint expert. They whispered, muttered, examined, questioned. Yet through it all, they treated her gently, with kindness. She repeated her tale from the beginning. Patrick had come home tired, too weary to go out for supper. She had placed the meat in the oven, it's cooking now, and gone to fetch vegetables. When she returned, she found him lying on the floor.
"Which grocer?" one of the detectives asked. Mary gave the name, and he leaned toward his partner, whispering. The second man slipped out into the street, returning 15 minutes later with notes in hand. There was more hushed talk, fragments drifting through her sobs. Acted normal, cheerful. Supper. Peas. Cheesecake. Impossible. The house slowly emptied. The photographer left. The doctor departed, and 2 men carried Patrick's body away on a stretcher. The fingerprint expert followed soon after. Only the detectives and 2 officers remained, their voices softer now, their manner unusually kind. Jack Noonan crouched beside her. "Wouldn't you rather go to your sister's house? Or mine? My wife would take care of you." Mary shook her head. "I can't move. Not even a yard. Please, let me stay here." "Then perhaps lie down on the bed," he suggested gently. "No," she whispered. "I'll stay in this chair. Later, maybe." So they left her where she sat while they searched the house. Now and then the detective asked another question. Sometimes Noonan passed by, speaking softly, almost tenderly. "Your husband was struck from behind. A heavy, blunt instrument. Metal, most likely. We'll find it. It's always the same. Get the weapon, and you've got the killer." Later, one of them joined her, lowering his voice. "Mrs. Maloney, is there anything in the house that could have been used? Something missing, perhaps? A large wrench, a heavy vase?" She shook her head calmly. "No vases. No spanner."
The search dragged on. Outside, she could hear the crunch of boots on gravel, the sweep of torchlight across the curtains. Inside, the detectives grew weary, their frustration mounting as the hours slipped toward 9. "Jack," she called softly as Sergeant Noonan passed, "would you mind pouring me a drink?" "Of course. Whiskey?" "Yes, just a small one. It might help." He handed her the glass, and she smiled faintly. "You should have one too," she urged. "You've been so kind, and you must be exhausted." He hesitated, then nodded. "Well, just a drop to keep me going." One by one, the others joined him, awkwardly sipping whiskey, trying to comfort her with gentle words. Noonan wandered into the kitchen, then returned quickly. "Mrs. Maloney, your oven's still on. The meat's inside." "Oh, dear," she exclaimed. "I'd forgotten." "Shall I turn it off?" "Yes, please, Jack. Thank you." When he came back, she looked at him with wide, tearful eyes. "Jack Noonan," she said softly. "Yes?" "Would you do me a favor? You and the others?" "We'll try, Mrs. Maloney." She leaned forward, her voice trembling but warm. "You've all been such good friends to Patrick, working so hard to catch the man who killed him. It's long past supper, and you must be starving. Patrick would never forgive me if I let you sit here hungry in his house. Why don't you eat the lamb in the oven? It should be just right by now."
"No, we couldn't possibly," Sergeant Noonan began. But Mary's voice trembled with insistence. "Please, I couldn't touch a bite myself, not after what's happened. But for you, it would be a kindness. Eat it, and then you can go back to your work." The men hesitated, glancing at one another. Hunger won. Soon they drifted into the kitchen, plates in hand, carving generous portions of lamb. Mary stayed in the other room, listening. Their voices were muffled, thick with food. "Have some more, Charlie?" "Better not finish it." "She asked us to. Said it'd be a favor." "All right then, pass me another slice." Between mouthfuls, their talk turned back to the crime. "That must have been one hell of a weapon," one muttered. "Doctor says the skull was shattered like a sledgehammer, which means it should be easy to find." "Exactly. No one carries something like that around for long." A belch broke the silence. "Personally, I think it's right here in the house, probably under our very noses. What do you think, Jack?" And in the next room, Mary Maloney sat quietly, her head bowed. Her shoulders trembled. Then, unable to contain herself, she began to giggle.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.